Hey everyone, welcome to Amazing Facts. As we already know how that COVID-19 pandemic has affected people's life all over the world, along with economy, development, etc. However, this has not been the first time that nature decides to show humans that they are not rulers of this world. So let's know histories of different pandemics that had affected the world. So let's hop into it. Number 10. Yellow fever. Yellow fever virus originated in Africa and has long been one of the most lethal and feared diseases, with the first pandemic reported in 1648 in the Yucatan. However, in the late 1800s, it was transported to North America and Europe, causing large outbreaks that disrupted economies and kills about 1 lakh to 1,50,000 of world's population. Yellow fever is an acute viral hemorrhagic disease transmitted by infected mosquitoes. Symptoms of yellow fever include fever, headache, jaundice, muscle pain, nausea, vomiting, and fatigue. A small portion of patients who contract the virus develop severe symptoms, and approximately half of those die within 7 to 10 days. 2 vaccines were developed in the 1930s after scientists isolated yellow fever virus in West Africa. The vaccine 17D was developed by the South African microbiologist Max Taylor at the Rockefeller Institute in New York City. This vaccine was widely used by the US in Army during World War II. Number 9. Asian flu. In February 1857, a new influenza A H2N2 virus emerged in East Asia, triggering a pandemic. Singapore experienced its first case of Asian flu in February 1957, Hong Kong in April 1957. The virus came to the United States quietly, with a series of small outbreaks over the summer of 1957. When the children went back to school in the fall, they spread the disease in classrooms and brought it home to their families. Infection rates were highest among school children, young adults during October 1957. Most influenza and pneumonia-related deaths occurred between September 1957 and March 1958. The elderly had the highest rates of death. The rapid development of a vaccine against the F2N2 virus and the availability of antibiotics to treat secondary infections limited the spread and mortality of the pandemic. The estimated number of deaths were about 1.1 million worldwide and 116,000 in the United States. Number 8. Cholera pandemics. There have been 6 cholera pandemics between 1817 to 1923. Symptoms of this disease includes watery diarrhea, vomiting, rapid heartbeat, low blood pressure. The first cholera pandemic was from 1817 to 1824, which began in Bengal and then spread across India. Hundreds of thousands of Indians died during this pandemic, including British troops also. The second cholera pandemic affected Russia, Hungary, and Germany in 1831, due to which many people died. Third cholera pandemic again deeply affected Russia during 1846 to 1860, killing over 1 million people. Fourth cholera pandemic of century was from 1863 to 1875, began in Ganges of Delta of Bengal and traveled to Mecca. Cholera spread throughout the Middle East and was carried to Russia, Europe, Africa, and North America. The fifth cholera pandemic cost lives in Europe, America, Russia, Spain, and Japan. Sixth cholera affected between 1899 to 1923 in India. All 6 cholera pandemics killed more than 1 million people. However, now antibiotics have been developed against this disease. Number 7. Antonine Plague. During 165 AD, Marcus Aurelius' empire was also swarmed by an infectious disease that nearly upended the Roman Empire. It was called the Antonine Plague. Due to this disease, people were overwhelmed. Doctors and government officials were baffled. All gatherings, festivals, sporting events were all cancelled. The economies plunged and the bodies were piled up. Symptoms were fever, headache which turns into danger with escalated black rashes, and coughing up blood with internal rupturing, which was so quarrelsome and painful that sometimes death was better option. It had a mortality rate of 2 to 3%. There was no chance that it could be cured at that time, but doctors and experts were trying their best to fight against this plague. This virus killed about 5 million people of Roman Empire, including 2 Roman emperors. Number 6. The Third Plague. The Third Plague was also a deadly disease which started at 1855. It affected the world for 100 years, from 1855 to 1959. It also struck all over 5 major continents, with major outbreaks in Hong Kong in 1894, Bombay in 1896, Sydney in 1900, Cape Town in 1901, and Los Angeles in 1924. It also caused around 12 million deaths during its region of terror, devastating populations worldwide. Having gained knowledge of virus transmission through fleas and rats, as well as its early warning signs and symptoms, the infected areas started a defense against the invading disease. Towards the end of the 19th century, doctors were experimenting with plague serums that often killed as many people as they cured. Other methods used involved vast quarantines and many more. Ultimately, a lot of these methods were not much of use, but it did set precedent in terms of scale of global reaction to a major viral pandemic. Number 5. HIV/AIDS. AIDS is a disease of the human immune system caused by the human immunodeficiency virus HIV. It often spreads through unprotected sex with infected person, sharing drug needle, or through blood contact with infected person. During the initial infection, a person may experience a brief period of influenza-like illness. This virus kills or damages immune system cells of the person, due to which person can't develop immunity against a normal disease and then die later. It originated in West Central Africa during the early 20th century. AIDS was first recognized in 1981. Since its discovery, AIDS has nearly 35 million deaths. AIDS is considered a pandemic, a disease outbreak which is present over a large area and is actively spreading. However, treatment is not available against this, but with proper medical care, person can live with this disease up to many years. Number 4. Plague of Justinian. During the reign of Emperor Justinian I, a plague took place that affected lives of millions of people. The plague arrived in Constantinople in 542 CE, finally disappearing in 750 CE. Originating in China and Northeast India, the plague was carried to Great Lakes region of Africa via sea trade routes. The point of origin for Justinian's plague was Egypt. The means of transmission of the plague was the black rat, which travelled on the grain ships and carts sent to Constantinople. Symptoms include illusions, nightmares, fevers, and swelling in the groin, armpits, and behind their ears. Some died immediately after developing symptoms. War and trade facilitated the spread of the disease throughout the Byzantine Empire. Historians have suggested that soldiers and the supply train supporting their military efforts acted as the means of transmission for the rats and fleas carrying the plague. Even the emperor caught the disease, though he did not die. Dead bodies littered the streets of the capital. The plague weakened the Byzantine Empire in political and economic ways. Trade throughout the empire became disrupted. Agriculture sector was also devastated. Number 3. Spanish flu. Spanish flu arrived in 1980, affecting over 500 million people and killing about 30 to 50 million people all over the world. The 1980 flu was first observed in Europe, the United States, and parts of Asia before spreading around the world. Young children, old people, pregnant women, and people with certain medical conditions face a higher risk. Symptoms include chills, fever, and fatigue. In spring 1918, however, deaths were low, but in fall of the same year, many victims died. In just 1 year, average life expectancy of America decreased by a dozen years. It became known around the world as the Spanish flu, as Spain was hard hit by the disease. This virus killed many soldiers during World War I. There was less number of doctors present due to World War I. That's why fighting the Spanish flu was very difficult. Officials imposed quarantines, ordered citizens to wear masks, and shut down public places including schools, churches, and theaters. By the summer of 1919, the flu pandemic came to an end, as those that were infected either died or developed immunity. Number 2. Smallpox. Smallpox during 15th century was very devastating on native population, with the first European explorers killing about 56 million people all over the world. Symptoms include widespread skin rash, severe headache, backache, abdominal pain, vomiting, diarrhea, etc. However, centuries later, smallpox became the first virus epidemic to be ended by a vaccine. In the late 18th century, a British doctor named Edward Jenner discovered that milkmaids infected with a milder virus called cowpox seemed immune to smallpox. Jenner famously inoculated his gardener's 9-year-old son with cowpox and then exposed him to the smallpox virus with no ill effect. In 1980, the World Health Organization announced that smallpox had been completely eradicated from the face of the earth. Number 1, and worst of all, Black Death, also known as bubonic plague. It is said that Black Death is the most fatal pandemic recorded in human history. From 1346 to 1353, an outbreak of the plague ravaged Europe, Africa, and Asia, with an estimated deaths between 75 to 200 million people, which was about 1/3 of the Europe's population. Originated in Asia, the plague most likely jumped continents via the fleas living on rats that so frequently lived aboard merchant ships. Ports being major urban centers at the time, it was perfect breeding ground for the rats, thus spreading the plague devastating 3 continents. Symptoms include blood and pus seeping out of swellings, which were followed by a host of other unpleasant symptoms: fevers, chills, vomiting, diarrhea, terrible aches and pains, and then in short order death. It is said that person going to sleep at night with best of his health may not wake up in morning if caught by this infection. Physicians rallied on crude and unsophisticated techniques such as bloodletting and boil lancing and superficial techniques. Spread of this disease was slowed down by keeping sailors in isolation. According to World Health Organization, there are still 1000 to 3000 cases of plague every year. So that's it for today guys. If you like this video, give thumbs up, share it with your friends and families and consider to subscribe hitting bell icon. It means a lot to me. And have a nice day.